Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Palm Beach County Bar Association Law Week Committee, Dangers of Cyberbullying panel discussion. My name is Kelsey Burke, and I have the honor to chair the Law Week Committee. We welcome questions from teachers, and we're hopeful that to have enough time at the end of the program to have our panelists answer some of those questions. To get started, I have the pleasure to introduce you to our moderator, Amanda Klopp. Amanda is an attorney at Ackerman and represents national and local businesses in diverse litigation matters with an emphasis on business dispute, breach of contract claims, professional malpractice claims, and fiduciary disputes. And she will take over our program now. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Law Week. Today we're talking about cyberbullying and the law. I wanted to note that the presenters today will be discussing Florida law. And this presentation is for informational purposes only, and anybody seeking advice about a particular legal situation should contact an attorney. At this point, I'll ask each panelist to introduce themselves. And I'll note for the teachers on the call today that we do have the ability for them to ask questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And to the extent that we have time, we will address those questions at the end. So with that, I'd like to ask Lisa to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lisa Carmona. I'm a senior attorney with the Palm Beach County School District, and I advise district staff on a number of matters, including student discipline matters.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, Lisa. Could I ask April to introduce herself?
Good morning. My name is Dr. April Bullard. I'm an instructional specialist with the School District of Palm Beach County, and I work with the Department of Safe Schools, and I'm responsible for the Bullying and Title IX initiative.
Great. Thanks, April. Could I ask John to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jean Francis, and I am an assistant state attorney at the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office. I've been an assistant state attorney for a little over 10 years. My current position is I'm the deputy chief of the juvenile division of the state attorney's office. And what that means is the only cases that I handle are juvenile cases, and I handle the prosecution of juvenile cases.
Great. Thanks, Jean. Sorry, I mispronounced your name there. And could I ask Stephanie to please introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I am Stephanie Cagnett-Myron. I have a private firm, Cagnett-Myron Law, where I represent victims of stalking, cyber stalking, revenge porn, and sexual violence. I'm a former prosecutor as well, and I even worked for the Legal Aid Society here in Palm Beach County in the Domestic Violence Division in the past as well. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our panelists for attending today. We really appreciate it. And so just to kick it off and go right into it, I'd like each panelist to address kind of in the context of their position, what is cyberbullying? And I guess I'll direct this question first to Lisa.
Hi, good morning. So cyberbullying in the school-related context relates to unwanted and repeated written, verbal, or physical behavior of any kind that includes threats, insults, or gestures that can cause discomfort, humiliation, or interfere with a student's school performance or their ability to participate in school-related activities.
Okay, great. April, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective?
Yes, I do. with my job responsibility, I usually handle incidences of students who have experienced cyberbullying. We've had, I can give an example. We've had some students who were playing video games over the weekend, and the students were allegedly cyberbullying students in this video game. I know several students know about Fortnite and Minecraft, and they have several apps, the Snapchat. So of course it occurred using social media. They were in Fortnite, of course, and during that they were saying some very inappropriate things. And of course, because of that, the disruption occurred on campus. And once the disruption came onto the campus, then the administrators were involved. But that's how we usually handle cyberbullying, when students are involved and it's occurring off campus.
Understood. Jean, is there a difference from the state's perspective in the definition or criteria for cyberbullying?
There is, many times where we receive our cases from is from the police agencies, either from the school police agencies or from other, police departments around the county. So the investigation will start out with the police agency or with the school. And then if it makes it to the level of probable cause, that's when it comes to us. And the police agencies would bring it to us for us to review it to see if there is in fact probable cause to believe that an actual crime occurred, not just that the conduct occurred. So what we see a lot of many times is the gaming, the online, actions of youth are how they come to us. They think that they are going to be anonymous. They won't be able to be found out. Nobody will be able to track who they are. But in fact, that is incorrect. And it ends up getting to the police department and eventually to us.
Understood. And is there a different level of proof or evidence that the state needs to pursue a case?
Well, for cyberbullying, the statute, there is a Florida statute 784.048. And in layman's terms, it's basically, when you break it down, it's sending, posting, or sharing negative or harmful, false or mean things about somebody else electronically via text, social media, gaming, Snapchat, Instagram, all of those, type of avenues. There is different levels to it. If it's just the cyber stalking, it's a misdemeanor, which is a lower level. If there's a credible threat involved with any type of threat, it could be a third-degree felony, which is a much higher level offense.
Understood. And Stephanie, from the civil law side, is there, anything that you want to add to the kind of boundaries and definition of cyberbullying?
Yes.
Looks like we might
Can you hear me?
might be losing Stephanie a little bit. Yeah, Stephanie, we might be losing your feed a little bit. I don't think we can hear you. So,
All right, I'm back.
Jean, okay, let's see if that works a little better. Okay, great. Yes, I can see you now. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
All right, so it falls under the umbrella of stalking, which is also a basis for an injunction or a restraining order, which would prohibit direct and indirect contact. So the use of electronic means to harass is a basis for seeking an injunction. But the reason why these types of presentations are so valuable is because a lot of people don't realize that what they're doing can have such serious consequences. And when you're talking about, you just think it's something innocent being said during a game or, something said in jest or just a joke, but, it's not taken that way. And if there's a credible threat, like Jean said, it can be a felony. You can have a felony conviction. And I was a prosecutor in Duval Duval County where they really pushed, charging juveniles as adults when they could, and that can have very serious consequences. And so, taking a step back and just being able to think before you send that, because once you push send or send a message or post something, you can't undo it. You can try to delete it or erase it, but it's still there somewhere. And so, just taking that second to think about that, because if you have an injunction in place against someone, you're in the same class. I mean, you may have to have different classes, or, your whole schedule, you may not be able to ride the same bus anymore. All of these things can be, put in place to protect the victim, to make sure that harassment doesn't continue. And so those are very serious consequences, for cyber stalking.
Right. So, Jean already mentioned there were criminal statutes with respect to cyberbullying. Are there additional civil statutes or common law actions that govern cyberbullying or can be tied to cyberbullying?
Yes, so that's where the restraining order, the petition for injunction for stalking, that's technically a civil cause of action. It's in family court, but it doesn't require you to be, a family member to file for a stalking injunction against someone. And now when, there's stalking and harassment that's going on, there could be other civil remedies. And so sometimes there are, homeowners insurance for the parents, if this is happening at their home, or, their devices are being used and they know about it. Or, sometimes it's even the parents who are the ones on the other end of that device doing the harassment. And so, there are very serious civil consequences. You can go after them for monetary damages, depending on the nature of what's going on. So there can be, very serious consequences, not just, looking at jail time, but financially as well.
Great, thank you. And from the district's perspective, Lisa, maybe you can address, if from the district's perspective, are there certain laws or rules or regulations related to cyberbullying? Oh, Lisa, you're on mute.
Students in the Palm Beach County School District are bound by the Student Code of Conduct. And under the Student Code of Conduct, there are serious consequences for bullying and cyberbullying. And one important fact to also bring forward is that cyberbullying can also include sharing someone else's post. So a student who receives a post that tends to humiliate or would cause discomfort to another student and then shares it with several other students could also be disciplined for cyberbullying under the district's policies. These sanctions could include, anything from referral to a mediation, as well as loss of privilege, up to and including suspension from school.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. And would any panelists like to talk about the state law relating to cyberbullying, the Stand Up for All Students Act? Possibly April, are you familiar with that law?
Yeah, I am, but I just wanted to add to that in regards to the Jeffrey Johnson Act. I don't know if many students are familiar with it. It was about a 15-year-old boy who was being bullied consistently on a regular basis. And because of it, he took his own life. And because of that, his mom was very proactive in getting this law into play. With that, if it is discriminatory, then Title IX becomes part of it. That means it is bullying. It's on the basis of the target's race, the gender, the religion, or the disability. So it's just not limited to cyberbullying. And I want the students to be aware of that. And it's also covered by the federal and the state civil rights laws.
Thank you. Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of various types of laws that can come into play in terms of cyberbullying. And I guess we've talked about a few different, yeah, go ahead, April.
I'm sorry, and one more thing with the Title IX, it also includes the sexual harassment. So when I'm handling incidences on our campus, as I stated earlier, I work for the school district of Palm Beach County. I'm handling only the student incidences. So a lot of times the incidences that come across are directly student related, and sexual harassment does fall under the Title IX component.
Understood. So the we've some of the panelists today have talked about some examples of cyberbullying. Maybe Stephanie, you could address the various types of cyberbullying and behaviors. We've already heard about sharing posts. Would other types of cyberbullying, other types of actions be considered cyberbullying besides sharing posts and making comments on video game platforms?
Yes, I mean, any kind of social media outlet you can think of. I mean, even WhatsApp or, just standard social media messaging, even if it's private or text messaging. And there's all of these spoof apps where you think that you're anonymous, and just because it's not your actual phone number showing up on the other end, they can still find out where it's coming from. And I see Jean shaking her head. A lot of people have this misconception, that they're hiding their identity in some way, but you're not. You always leave an electronic footprint, and it's in your device. It's through your service providers. And so, there's no real anonymity, whatever you are online. And so even if you take steps to try to hide your identity, there are ways to subpoena that information and get that evidence. And so, there are a lot of spoof apps out there. They change every day, but, it's all the same thing, just issuing a subpoena to your service provider or getting that information, they can still identify you. And so no matter what modality you're using, even if you're just texting, that's still, that harassment. You're contacting them in some way. And I see that people say and do things behind a screen that they would never do in person. And so, the content and the nature of what's being said, especially when you think that they don't know who you are, it's scary. And so just know that there are ways, no matter what electronic means are being used, there are ways to subpoena that information and still get that evidence that you need to be able to go forward.
So for our students, can you explain subpoena, the word subpoena?
Sorry about that. Thank you. So a subpoena is a tool that you have whenever there's a case pending. So whenever you have an injunction, or when the criminal prosecutor is going forward with, criminal charges, or even the police officer, whenever they are trying to build their case and they are trying to gather evidence, they can still have the ability to try to issue a subpoena, which is a document where they can go to Verizon or Sprint or to Yahoo or Google and, through Facebook, and say, here is the account, here are the messages, here are the dates and times this is happening. Please give me all of the data that you have on this specific communication. And then on the back end, we get all of that information that you think that they're hiding. And so that's where it really draws that line between, okay, this is the person who's sending this message, and this is how we know, your computer, your phone is telling us it's you, even whenever it doesn't show up as you. And so that's where the whole, the subpoena gets you that information. It's your evidence gathering to build your case. And the criminal standard is much harder. But for an injunction, it's not the same high burden to show, to make that connection. And so, even if there's not enough evidence there for the criminal prosecution to be able to go forward, it still could be enough to get that injunction, which provides you that protection. And the good thing about the injunction is once it's in place, any violation of that injunction is a separate crime in and of itself, without showing that whole history, that whole pattern. Just showing that the injunction is in place, and whatever happened after that to violate, that's enough to prove that crime of violating the injunction. And so that's where, the subpoena power is very important, to be able to gather that evidence from even your devices. You can issue a subpoena to say, give me your computer and give me your phone. And they can do that and have your actual device. And even if you think it's erased, it's still there. And so it's there somewhere, and there's ways to get it. So, it's very important to know that there are a lot of different tools that are available to try to identify that person who's trying to be anonymous.
And can you kind of explicate a little more about what an injunction is?
Yes. So an injunction, yes, a lot of people, you hear the word restraining order or no contact order. And no contact orders are put in place in the criminal case to protect the victim. And that provides a zone of protection for the victim while that criminal case is pending. But you as the victim have the ability, or even as a parent on behalf of your child, you have the ability to seek a petition for injunction, a restraining order against that bully, against that harasser. And it provides a zone of protection. It prohibits that bully from contacting the victim directly through, going to their house if they don't go to the same school, showing up at their school, from going to their work or contacting their friends, their family, their parents, anyone as a means to harass, that direct or indirect contact, and even harassment through electronic means on social media. It prohibits all of that. And once, you have to go forward, file for your petition, there's a hearing, you have to testify, there's things that have to be done to get that protection in place, but a judge can sign an order and give you that protection. And there's another, really important provision about weapons. Through the statute, it's mandatory that the person who has an injunction against them, so the bully, they can't have access to weapons. They are prohibited from having any access to weapons. They have to turn any weapons over, which is very important. And that provides a greater protection for victims as well. And so there are a lot of different things that can be done to try to put a stop to the harassment.
Thank you for that. And I wonder if Jean can address for us potentially all of the various places that cyberbullying could happen on, the types of platform and the media. If it can be anything, if it can be email or text message, if the post has to be public, or if private posts would count as well. With a limited audience, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So when we talk about cyberbullying and we're talking about electronic means, that means any type of electronic format, using your phone, texting, any type of social media, any type of gaming device that uses an online service where you can communicate with other people, online, people that you've never met, some people you've never met before. You don't even know where they are or who they are many times. What we see some of happening is there may be, kids going to school together. There may be something brewing on campus when the youth were all on campus, and then they, the issues don't, blow up on campus. What'll happen is the kids will go home, they'll get on their gaming devices or on their cell phones. And at that point, they start harassing, each other. Sometimes they will set up some sort of, fake account with a fake name or a fake picture. So then they will think that the other person doesn't know who it is. The great thing is, cell phones are great. We all love cell phones. Our kids love gaming devices. Adults love social media too. So do kids. But the thing about it is that the state can get access to your information. And when we go and we talk to kids at school, we ask them how many of you have cell phones or electronic devices, a laptop, gaming device. And most of the time, all of them have it. Everybody raises their hand. And they're great. Everybody uses them. Everybody loves them. The problem is that the police can also obtain what's in your cell phone. And one thing we ask them is, if we were to put on this big screen that they're looking at right now, every single thing that was in their device, every picture, every message, every chat, that everybody could see it, what would you think? And normally what we hear are gasps from the kids, because many times they're doing things or saying things that you would never, ever, ever say to a person to their face. And that's the key with the cyber stalking, is they're saying things and doing things that they wouldn't normally do. And that's really why cyber stalking, kind of became an issue. Another thing that we have and has been a real problem with the youth is threats to kill. It is under a separate statute, but it is similarly many times used on gaming platforms, electronic formats. Guys, this is not a joke. None of these things are a joke. A lot of times, once the police investigation gets started, the police are speaking with these kids and they say, well, I didn't mean it. I didn't really want to do that. That wasn't what I meant. Guess what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you think it's a joke. It's not a joke. And it doesn't go away. You think if I delete this off my phone, if I erase my entire phone, this is, go away. Nobody will be able to find out that this happened. But that isn't true. The police can get a search warrant, which is similar to a subpoena, but even more so is it's in the investigation stage and nobody knows about it. They don't tell you that this is what they're going to be looking for. The police will bring the information to us at the state. We prepare a search warrant and have the judge sign off on it, and it will pull all of your records from your phones, from your devices, but also from the platforms. So from Instagram, from Discord, from Snapchat. And Snapchat's a big one. Everybody thinks it goes away in 24 hours. It does not go away, and we can get those records. So you have to really, really be careful. And it's not a joke, guys, because these type of things can affect your life forever.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I think at this point, I'd like to ask Lisa, the process-wise, what happens, and you've kind of alluded to it already, what happens process-wise when a student is accused of cyberbullying another student for purposes of the Palm Beach County School District process applicable to school district schools only?
Yes, so every allegation of cyberbullying is taken very seriously by school staff. Any student, parent, friend, anyone who sees or has evidence of cyberbullying is encouraged to report cyberbullying. Once a school administrator or any district staff person has that information, it is then forwarded for investigation. Every incident is investigated. If, for example, we talked before about being able to get subpoenas for cell phones or for other records. However, even more importantly, if a student engages in cyberbullying using a district-owned device, for example, a Google Chromebook that was issued by the Palm Beach County School District, or if the cyberbullying occurs through a Google chat started through the district's Google website, then the district's IT department can do the search and we'll find out. They can narrow it down to the IP address, to the exact location where that computer was at the time that the offending post was made. The investigation will include reviewing the post, interviewing witnesses, interviewing the student who's accused of posting the offensive post, and speaking also to parents about it and finding out, often what we find out is that parents were unaware that their student was maybe not actually in a Google Classroom now that we're online, but engaged in a separate Google Meet during class time where they were all making fun of someone else who was sitting in a classroom. And all of these things will have consequences.
Thank you. And April, if you could add to this on kind of where you get involved in this process.
So as Lisa mentioned earlier, an investigation is conducted on the campus. However, if parents feel that they are not pleased with the outcome of the investigation that occurred, then they would request through our regional office for a neutral person or neutral party to conduct another investigation. And then that's when I would go in and speak with the witnesses involved, the alleged target, the alleged aggressors, look at all of the evidence, and then from there conduct my findings. From there, I try to tell the students, you have to be very honest with your parents about what you're sharing over the internet, what you're posting in these apps, because a lot of the times, as Lisa mentioned, a lot of the parents are not aware of what their students are in fact posting. So it's very important that these students are honest with their parents and admit to exactly what's being posted, because if the parents are looking at the evidence that was shared, then a lot of the times they're taken aback and have no idea what was being posted.
Thank you. And so I guess I'll ask this question again from the state attorney's perspective. Jean, you've also sort of alluded to the process of how investigations get started by state attorneys, by referrals from the police. I understand there may also be a process where you can get referrals from the school board and from platforms themselves. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. So the majority of our cases, well, actually all of our cases are going to come from a police agency. There are the platforms themselves, there's federal laws that require them to report suspicious activity to the police agencies in their area, which is then how that investigation would get started. So for example, if a youth is on some sort of gaming device on Discord or on, the chat function of one of their gaming systems, and, there's some inappropriate things going on, the actual gaming site or website could kick them out. And the kids are like, oh, that's it, I got kicked out. Well, that is not always the end of it. It's not just the consequence that you get kicked out. Many times certain words trigger those online forums to report it to the investigatory authorities in their area. And that's how an investigation could get started. Locally, what we'll have is that we will get cases from the Palm Beach County School Police, School District Police, or from other police agencies. So for example, if it's something that the Palm Beach County School District Police are investigating, they will do their investigation, talk to the youth, get all of the evidence, all of the information that they can give, and then they will bring it to us. So we don't do the investigation portion as far as that. And when they bring it to us, they basically tell us what happened. And we have to review it to see if a crime was committed. And many times it's in the investigation stages. We have a report of a youth that was harassing another youth online. These are what we believe the messages are. What we need is the exact messages, all of the messages, which is at that point where search warrants get involved, and they send the search warrant, get the judge to sign it, send a search warrant to the gaming device, whether it's Discord, Snapchat, and they get all of the official records from those companies. And it has every single thing down the line of what was said. And like I said before, and I know that every one of us know, when you send an email, when you send a text message, the person receiving it doesn't always take it the same way that you meant it. And that's the difference. When you talk to somebody in person, you can say something in a joking way and they may take it as a joke. But if you're saying it online, it doesn't look like a joke and it's not a joke. And those are your words. So that's where we're seeing a lot of things come from. Once we get the case, if we believe that there's probable cause that a crime was committed, normally what happens is, depending on the charge, the severity of it, what we're seeing, like I said, I briefly touched on threats to kill. What we're seeing on is a lot of things with people, threatening schools. And that is a huge, huge issue. It's not a joke. They get upset with somebody online and they say, well, I'm coming to the school tomorrow. Or they, post a picture with a weapon, or even if it's a fake weapon, it doesn't matter. What happens then, normally when they bring those cases to us, because those are taken very seriously, is if we believe that there's probable cause that a crime is committed, we'll issue a take into custody order, which is essentially a pickup order. They'll go out to your house, kids. They'll arrest you in front of your parents. They'll arrest you at school. They will take you down to the juvenile detention center. You will remain there overnight until you see a judge. A detention center is a lockdown facility. It's jail for juveniles, essentially. It's a detention center, and you will stay there. And what happens is the next day, the judge will see the police reports. He will see whatever evidence there is and make a determination as to whether or not you're going to go home with your parents or whether you're going to stay in the secure detention facility. And, you know, many times, depending on the severity of the charges, we're not only looking at juvenile charges, we're looking at filing, you know, charges in adult court. So you may end up getting transferred to the adult jail and sitting in there and waiting for how much time you may have to go to prison for. So guys, you know, very, very serious consequences can happen. And most importantly, the main thing that you have to remember, kids, is, you know, before you send a text message, a message, you know, on any type of electronic or gaming device, think about it. Is this going to affect my future? You know, everybody gets upset about things and things kind of can get blown out of proportion at times. But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, if you're upset today, tomorrow you'll be past it, things will move on. If you send those messages and say those things, whether you're joking or whether it's in anger, they can come back and have lifelong consequences.
And Jean, to follow up on that, you mentioned there was potential jail time for cyberbullying and related crimes. So what's the extent of possible jail time that a student could face?
Well, for juveniles, if they're treated in the juvenile system, it's not going to be jail time. But how we relate a misdemeanor offense is if you were an adult, it could be up to a year in jail. If it's a third-degree felony, it could be up to 5 years in prison. But for juveniles, what we have is there's different levels there's probation, there's diversionary programs actually start at the bottom, then probation, then there's commitment programs, which essentially in layman's terms are juvenile jail. They're facilities where you live away from your parents for, you know, an undetermined period of time. And they basically try to rehabilitate you. You would not be in your home, you would not be with your families, and it would be up to the judge, to the defense attorneys, to the state as to how long you're going to be there for. So when they're making their decisions on how they're going to handle a situation or what they're going to say, there can be consequences at home from your parents, consequences from school, consequences from the state and the judges, and that's not really what you want. You know, you're going to get it from all angles, and it's not going to be fun.
And Jean, just for clarification, do these things that happen in the criminal system go on a person's permanent record and potentially affect things like going to college?
Oh, 100%, guys. You know, everything that you want to do in life, every job, every college, you have to make an application, and you are going to be asking for something from somebody. I'm going to ask to attend your school. I'm going to ask for this job from you. And what they're going to look at is, okay, well, let me see what you have for me. And if there's a job opening, you know, say you want to get a job at McDonald's on the weekends or during the week, and there's two people, you know, who two job applications they have open. They're going to interview you and somebody else. Well, you've been arrested. This other person hasn't. Who do you think they're going to choose? I mean, you have to give yourself the best opportunities in life to be able to do anything that you want to do. And, you know, there are a lot of different times when this can come back up. Even if, you know, best case scenario, you were to get arrested for something and the state were to drop the charges. Bottom line is it's still an arrest. So if you fill out an application, there's different questions. And one of the questions could be, have you ever been arrested for a crime? The other question could be, were charges ever filed against you? So the first question would be, if we drop the charges, yes, I was arrested, but no, there were no charges filed. So the arrest doesn't necessarily go away. So you'll have to answer for that as well.
Thank you. That was very informative. The next question I'd like to direct towards Lisa, because it's been referred to a little bit, but For district schools, there are district consequences. And I think you may have mentioned district consequences can include school level consequences such as suspension. Could you explain that a little more?
Sure. So, the district schools are bound by the Student Code of Conduct. And the Student Code of Conduct has basically a number of consequences that can happen for different types of incidences. For incidents of bullying, there can be consequences that can include up to and including in-school suspension or even out-of-school suspension. In-school suspension, students would report to school during the normal school day and would sit in a suspension classroom or suspension area, in-school suspension area, where they would be doing work all day and would be separated from their peers. Out-of-school suspension would mean students would be not allowed to attend school for a number of days, can vary from 0 to 10 days. Now remember, a school week is 5 days, so 10 days is 2 school weeks, and that's an awful lot of time to miss out of school. The other important part of suspensions is that most college applications nowadays also ask you, have you ever been suspended from school? So if you've been suspended, you've got to acknowledge that again. So here's another way, just as Jean was explaining before, where a mistake you make when you are in middle school, when you're 12, 13 years old, can have consequences when you're applying for college 4 years or 5 years from now.
Thank you. And expulsion is also a potential consequence?
In very rare cases would expulsion be a consequence because of the change in the Student's Code of Conduct. But suspension would be, stay away agreements are very likely. Those are, even if there is no injunction in court, if the other student's parents do not take this to a court to get an injunction, schools often put in place what's called a stay away agreement, which is similar. It's a in-school injunction. Basically, students agree, or the one student, the offending student, agrees that he or she will not be in contact with the other student. They are not to communicate in school. They are not to communicate outside of school either. Absolutely no contact. There's a change of classes so that they're no longer in the same classes, and pretty much will restrict the aggressor or the offending student's movement within the school.
So cyberbullying puts students at risks of being separated from their friends in their classes.
It does. It does.
In
some cases, actually, we've also moved students from one school to another.
So even a change in schools.
It could possibly be a change in schools as well. Yes.
Very informative. In private charter schools that are outside the board, would they sometimes have similar policies or more stringent policies?
Every school has different policies outside of the district, so I would not be able to speak to charter schools, and I would advise every student from a charter school who's listening or from a private school to talk to their school administrators and find out, inform themselves of what their particular school's policy about this is.
Thank you. And then I think briefly, I'd like Stephanie to address whether it's it can be a defense to a claim of cyberbullying if a student deletes the post or apologizes. Is that a legal defense to cyberbullying?
So that wouldn't be a defense. And so, trying to delete something or cover up evidence or hide evidence is something that can be used as an admission of guilt, to show, hey, look, they know what they're doing is wrong because they're trying to hide it. And so, it's not helpful behavior. But, things that people consider, if you are sorry for what you've done, and they're, maybe it was something taken out of context, like something that you said as a joke, and you want to clarify that, that can help change how it's viewed, but it's not a defense. And so, you can't unring a bell, but, your next steps do, kind of dictate the direction of how your case is going to go. And so, it's never too late to kind of turn around and do the right thing or accept responsibility. But if the person who is being harassed, if the victim doesn't want any contact, it's not a good idea to approach them and say, I'm sorry, or try to reach out to them, because they don't want any further contact. And so, the best course is to just stop the harassment. But, if it's something where, you immediately want to explain or just say, hey, look, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean it that way. I didn't know what impacted you that way. And it's an isolated incident, then that's something that wouldn't really be stalking, because stalking and cyberbullying in the stalking context, there has to be a pattern. And so, there's case law out there that 2 emails sent in the same day is enough. But, if one is a harassing email and then the other is the email saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize before I sent it, that's not what I meant, then that's not really a harassing email in and of itself. And so to get that pattern, there's going to need to be more. So in that scenario, it's a little different, but, it's always good to, stop the harassment. And if someone is telling you that they don't want any further contact, it's not okay, even if you're just trying to apologize, to keep trying to contact them, because all they want is to be left alone. And so if the harassing post is still up, it's not a good idea to leave it up, but, because it's still doing damage, it's still harmful. But, if you are just deleting a message off of your phone to try to hide evidence, that's different. And so, it's always good to kind of accept responsibility and try to do the right thing, but don't force yourself on the person who's telling you, I don't want any further contact. I've had injunctions against people who broke up and they're sending flowers and saying, I'm so sorry. And they're saying, stop contacting me. And that's enough to get an injunction. If someone is telling you, I don't want you contacting me, just because you're trying to be nice, doesn't mean it's okay. And so, it's very important when someone says stop or leave me alone, that you leave them alone. And so, that's something to keep in mind.
Thank you. That's very informative. I at this point, I want to make sure that we address what a student watching today can do if they are being cyberbullied. And I understand, Lisa, that there is a 24/7 bullying hotline. And if you could, I think we'll have that displayed on the screen there for anyone who wants to see it. If you could just explain that, Lisa.
Sure. So Palm Beach County school districts have, schools have a 24-hour, 7 days a week bullying hotline where students can either email, call, or text a report of bullying or cyberbullying. They can also use their student portal, and every campus has an anonymous drop box where students can also file a complaint or write a complaint and drop it in the drop box. Students can also reach out to school administrators or trusted teachers and discuss their concerns in person if they'd like to.
Just one correction, we no longer have the texting capability. It's just a bullying hotline. They can leave a message and that call will be followed up by administrators. Sorry, Lisa.
That's okay.
Okay, great. And are there on campus resources, Lisa?
There's a Dropbox on every campus, and there are school administrators, assistant principals, deans, the principal themselves, any trusted individual, the guidance counselor, anyone that the student trusts, they should approach and discuss their concerns about bullying or cyberbullying.
Okay, thank you. And Jean, what would be your perspective on how a student maybe could handle being bullied by somebody that's outside, potentially outside the school context? I think it's outside the school context at least.
Tell somebody you trust, a parent, a family member, a close adult friend. Talk to somebody about it. Don't just try to keep it to yourself because you think, oh, it'll get better. A lot of times it doesn't get better and it continues. Another thing is that one of the things we tell kids is sometimes kids aren't brave enough to tell an adult or somebody that they trust, but they'll tell a friend. If that happens and one of your friends is telling you that's what's going on, you be the one to tell somebody, get them help, because there's many kids who don't do that and who don't get the help. And honestly, in the United States, every 12 minutes, somebody under the age of 18 commits suicide. You have to think about what your actions of what you say or do could push somebody over the edge. You wouldn't want somebody to say something like that to your friend or your brother or your sister. Don't say it about another person. Just think about that.
So if you see something, you should say something, even if it's you or some friend.
Yes.
Stephanie, maybe you can speak to the civil side about what you should do if you have actually been accused of cyberbullying somebody, what your next steps might be.
Well, you want to make sure that you don't continue whatever that behavior is. And so if someone accuses you of bullying them or saying something that was threatening or harassing, and even if you don't think it is, or that's not what you meant by it, don't keep doing it, because obviously it's not being received the way that you intended. And so it's important to recognize that, even if you don't agree with them, even if you think that there's nothing wrong or it was something said as a joke. There are very serious consequences for that type of behavior. And, just because you're under 18 or just because you think you can hide your identity, there are serious consequences. And even if that victim isn't the one reporting, as you heard from Jean, there are systems in place, even in these gaming programs and Fortnite and other, games where they automatically report when certain words are used or certain language comes up. I mean, there are things that automatically get reported to law enforcement. So it's something to keep in mind and to be mindful of. And, sadly, this generation just doesn't have, you can't turn it off. And so where in the past, school years are hard enough as it is, but you used to be able to leave home and get reprieve and just relax and know that you had some space that was your own. And now you don't have that anymore. You leave and it's even worse. I mean, you are constantly getting barraged with messages or whatever it is. And even if it's not, it's other people telling you, oh, did you see this post about you or whatever, but it's constant. There is no break now. And so just providing that space, just taking a step back, and something that has been helpful, because everyone gets angry. Everyone has gone through bad situations with people. It happens, but it's what you do to deal with that. And so, something they tell you in law school is whenever you're going to have opposing counsel, people who make you just so angry, don't push send, sleep on it, write it out. Don't put their name in there, or just, do that for your own. You have to say it, but don't send it. And so, don't put that phone number in there. Don't put that email address, just write out what you want to say so you get it off your chest, and then think about it that next morning. And, you're going to think about it differently. And, we all have those types of emotions. And, it's just, the difference is pushing send. You can't undo it. And so just taking that time that you need to think about it and walk away and just take a moment and take a breath. It can change the course of your life. And so, it's worth it just to walk away, take a minute. And it's hard to do, but it can really, keep you out of trouble. Even if it's something that you were just going to say as a joke, reflect on that, think about it. You have to be mindful of what you say, and, especially in writing or, on electronic formats, because it's always there. And so, just take a step back and reflect before you push send or before you type it out or do something that you can't take back. So just, be mindful.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful advice, I think. And I wanted to, we've got a few minutes left, but I wanted to address one of the questions that came in. And specifically, I guess there's a lot of gamers out there, student gamers, and they were wondering if the panelists could provide some more specific examples of what kind of behaviors could constitute cyberbullying in a video game context. I know we've alluded to it a little bit, but if I could potentially ask panelists to give some generalized examples of what they've seen constitute cyberbullying, and I'll open it up to whichever panelist wants to address that question in the video game context.
Well, what I can speak to is an incident that I addressed a while ago. Some students were in Fortnite, and of course they were talking about the game, which then it turned into all of the students ganging up on one specific student, belittling him, calling him dumb, calling him stupid, and telling him to go and kill himself. And then of course, he reported it to his parents. The parents reported it to the school. Even though it happened off campus, the students then brought it onto the campus and started talking about him and name calling in the classroom, in the cafeteria, which then it started to become a disruption of on campus. And once it becomes a disruption on campus, then the school administrators get involved and the necessary investigation occurs. Several safeguards are implemented to ensure the safety of all students on campus. And of course, it is captured on discipline referrals, and students do receive consequences for their actions.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
thanks,
if
April.
I could just jump in real quick. It's important for everyone to realize that just because someone engages in cyberbullying on the weekend, at night, during spring break, that does not mean that they will not receive consequences on campus. If their behavior leads another student to feel unsafe or unwelcome in school, then that will meet the criteria for cyberbullying, and the students who engage in that behavior will be disciplined according to the code of conduct.
Okay, very helpful. Perhaps Jean or Stephanie, if you've got any more generalized examples without, pinpointing any particular cases about video games and the types of cyberbullying that can occur in those contexts.
There is no, video game exception. Just because you're playing in a violent video game, it doesn't mean that you get to say violent things then. And I know that's kind of what happens when they're in that mindset, but there is no exception. And when you say things like that, or you think it's appropriate, a judge probably doesn't even know what that game is. And so, you're not talking to your peers whenever you are going to be in a situation trying to explain yourself. You're going to be talking to someone who's probably never heard of that game, has no idea what you're talking about, and they're going to take those words at face value, which come across very, very badly. And so there's no sidestepping, what you're saying. And so, it's important not to get caught up in that, because those words have consequences. And so you have to, take it seriously. And just because other people are in that, that's how they talk about the game, or, in the game, you may be the one that it becomes the example. And so, you just don't want to put yourself in that position because of what it will do to your future, your family, the impact it has on, those around you. It's not just you that's impacted, it's everyone else. Everything else about your life is impacted, and your whole future can be impacted just by something that you say jokingly in a game. And so it's not worth it. So just, be mindful of what you are saying, and think of it outside of that context. If you were just walking, to go grab lunch and you heard someone say that, how would you react? If you weren't in that context, it's kind of how you have to think of it, because that's really how it's viewed. But Jean, I know that you deal with that in juvenile, I'm sure, on a frequent basis. So I don't want to take up all the time.
Okay, we'll have Jean address maybe a couple more contexts of video game cyberbullying, and then I guess we'll have to wrap it up.
I mean, I'm not going to give specifics because there isn't specifics. Every case is different. Every set of facts are different. Every circumstance is different. What I can say is that you kids know what's appropriate and you know what's inappropriate. You can see something and you can be part of it, or you can see something and say, I want nothing to do with this. I'm not getting involved with this. I'm exiting out of this game. I'm exiting out of this chat room. I want nothing to do with it. And that's one of the most important things too, is that in real life, you know, in school, your friends are important to you. But there are many situations that your friends get involved in that you can end up getting in trouble for by being involved with them, because you end up in the middle of it. So the same way that you have choices of who you make friends with in person, you have choices with on who you are hang out with or are doing things with online. So don't participate in it. You know, the safest thing is to just, you know, just not have anything to do with it. Just like Stephanie said, she's exactly right. When somebody else is looking at what you've written, we may not know that game. We may not know the wording, you know, the wording that was used or what was going on in that game that you're commenting about. What we're seeing is the plain text, the written text that's coming out. And it's, you know, I know that we've said this before, but what's said in a text and email online is not necessarily the same as when you're saying it to a person in person and joking with them. But many times there are things that you say online that you would never, ever, ever say to a person. So you have to think about that as well.
Thank you. And I think with that, that will probably be the end. We're scheduled to wrap it up. And so I don't know if Kelsey, if you've got any final comments for us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to all of our panelists, April, Jean, Lisa, and Stephanie. We greatly appreciate all the insight and information that you've provided the students, as well as the teachers and ourselves. Thank you, Amanda, for being a great moderator, and thank you to the Palm Beach County Bar Association and the schools and the students for participating. We hope that you learned a great deal. If you have any questions, do talk to your teachers, your guidance counselors, or someone that you trust. And again, thank you so much to everyone, and we hope everyone enjoys the rest of Law Week.